Brad Pitt did not simply rise through Hollywood. He became one of the lasting images by which a generation recalls its screen idols. As the anarchic Tyler Durden, the warrior Achilles, and the stuntman Cliff Booth, he embodied danger, physical grace, quiet defiance, and the quiet cracking of men once thought indestructible. He left Missouri with almost no money and no assurance of success, worked anonymous jobs, and eventually reached Oscars and worldwide recognition. For years he projected control, yet no role could prepare him for a family living in separate worlds or for a loss that could never be repaired. Only weeks before his mother died, he looked into a camera, smiled, and said the ordinary words, "Love you, Mom." That single sentence became a final public goodbye. What force reduced Hollywood's golden figure to a son whose last spoken affection could receive no reply? His earliest private struggle began inside the faith that ordered his family's life. Born on December 18, 1963, in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and raised in Springfield, Missouri, he was the oldest of William and Jane Pitt's 3 children. Bright, athletic, and socially at ease, he grew up under the steady discipline of a father who ran a trucking company and a mother who worked as a school counselor. The household was shaped by responsibility, restraint, and Southern Baptist belief. He later described that world as First Baptist, the cleaner, stricter, by the book form of Christianity. He was loved there, yet he also learned that certain questions could unsettle the calm. For a curious boy, belonging meant safety, while doubt could feel like disloyalty. Church gave that tension its clearest form. He remembered sitting in the pews while the preacher searched for someone to offer the closing prayer. The room grew quiet. His body tightened. He waited, hoping another name would be chosen. Around him the service stayed calm. Inside him a child was learning how frightening his own voice could feel. He wanted to laugh, challenge, explore, and test what he had been taught, while the culture around him prized certainty and self-control. Years later, he named the weight plainly. Guilt was the thing he found most destructive about it. He was still a boy, yet doubt already felt like disobedience. For a moment, there was only the fear he had learned to hide. Then ordinary life resumed. He played sports, joined school activities, charmed classmates, and appeared to fit. The strain stayed invisible, measuring every question, fearing disappointment, and looking composed while uncertainty pressed underneath. His smile was real. It simply carried more than anyone could see. Cinema became the first place where those hidden questions needed no apology. As a teenager, he found stories in which people could doubt, fail, rebel, wander, and still remain worthy of love. Films did not erase Missouri. They showed him that life could be larger than the path mapped around him. That discovery pulled him toward acting classes and eventually westward in a battered car with only a few $100s and no promise that Hollywood would ever learn his name. Fame would later enlarge his face across enormous screens, while private losses revealed how deeply Springfield had stayed with him. The boy trained to remain capable and controlled would spend decades portraying men who fracture, flee, endure, and search for meaning. His earliest hardship was not poverty or public shame. It was the intimate fear that becoming fully himself might cost him the place where he first learned to belong. Springfield taught him how to stay composed. The movies would teach him what to do with every feeling he had once been afraid to name. Pressure, not glamour, drove him west in 1986. Springfield had given him family, discipline, and a future that looked respectable. Yet the life waiting after college no longer felt like his own. As a teenager, he had disappeared into dark theaters, sometimes staying for another feature because the screen offered what ordinary life did not: permission to wander, fail, and begin again. He remembered returning to Tommy for the pinball sequence. Ordinary People and Saturday Night Fever revealed worlds far beyond Missouri. At the University of Missouri, he studied journalism with an emphasis in advertising and came within 2 credits of graduating. Then he stopped. He later said he was a paper short of finishing. He packed a worn Datsun with clothes, cassette tapes, and roughly $325, leaving behind a nearly earned diploma for a city where no one knew his name. Years later, He looked back without apology and called the choice perfect. At 22, however, perfection looked like an empty highway, and the terrifying possibility that he had just abandoned the safest life he would ever be offered. Humiliation met him under the Los Angeles sun. He took work through a job agency, delivering refrigerators, driving performers to private bookings, and standing beside traffic inside a giant chicken costume for an El Palo Loco opening. The suit trapped the heat. Cars passed. No one looking through a windshield could have known that the man waving from inside it had crossed the country to become an actor. He later dismissed those years as a lot of strange odd jobs, yet each shift paid for food, rent, and lessons with Roy London. In those rooms, uncertainty became material rather than a weakness to hide. From 1987 through 1990, brief appearances in Dallas, Growing Pains, and 21 Jump Street kept him working without making him secure. The checks were small, the roles smaller, and his looks often arrived in the room before his talent did. He had left college to find a voice. Hollywood kept asking him to stand there and be handsome. Recognition finally arrived in 1991 wearing a cowboy hat. He fought through repeated chances and disappointments for the drifter J.D. in Thelma and Louise, a script he felt was close to the world he knew. The part went elsewhere, reopened, vanished again, and returned only after another actor left. The role occupied only a few scenes, yet the camera understood him instantly. Sun-bleached hair, dangerous ease, a smile audiences remembered after the film moved on. Ridley Scott later called the hairdryer sequence the beginning of Brad Pitt. Posters followed. Magazine covers followed. A career that had barely survived suddenly accelerated beyond his control. But inside the triumph was the wound he had feared from the beginning. The world had noticed him, and much of it seemed interested only in the surface. He later judged even that celebrated scene with painful severity, saying he flatlined that day and failed the scene by a few degrees, and that it was Gina's performance that made his. That confession reveals the artist beneath the image, still measuring, still dissatisfied, still afraid beauty might be mistaken for ability. His first great victory did not end the struggle, it made the struggle visible. When he was unknown, he feared Hollywood would never see him. Once it did, he had to spend years forcing it to look deeper and recognize the artist's glory arrived early. Yet he spent decades fighting the image that reached audiences before his talent. A river runs through it revealed tenderness beneath the famous face. Legends of the Fall turned him into a wounded romantic icon. Seven exposed fury. Fight Club made him a cultural force. Troy helped define a generation's vision of masculine power. With paydays reported at $20 to $30 million per film, the world saw beauty, command, and invincibility. He remembered a less polished interior. Looking back on years of drinking and emotional avoidance, he admitted he was running from feelings. The line cuts through the magazine covers and the title of Sexiest Man Alive. The face remained composed. The man behind it was still trying to endure himself. Restlessness carried him behind the camera. In 2001, he co-founded Plan B Entertainment with Jennifer Aniston, helping create a home for films many studios might have considered too difficult. The company brought 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight to the screen, both later winning Best Picture. Producing gave him another form of courage. He could use his influence to protect stories about dignity, injustice, survival, and lives Hollywood had pushed to the edge of the frame. Awards multiplied. Marriages fractured. The habits he used to bury difficult emotions followed him home. His later conclusion came without ornament. You either deny them all of your life or you answer them and evolve. Vindication arrived on February 9, 2020. At 56, he stepped beneath the Oscar lights and accepted his first Academy Award for acting for once. Upon a time in Hollywood, applause rose around him. The statue rested in his hand. For a few minutes, the journey appeared complete. The beautiful face had become an actor of range, a producer of consequence, and a man whose choices had changed cinema. Then the ceremony moved on. The lights softened. The noise receded. He could not hide. No trophy could revise broken relationships, return years blurred by alcohol, or by the peace that estates, rare art, and a fortune measured in hundreds of millions had failed to deliver. Success had given him freedom, influence, and enduring work. It had also brought him to the one place applause could no longer protect him from himself. His deepest victory may never fit inside a golden statue. It may be the harder act of standing still when the noise is gone, facing the pain he once outran, and choosing at last to evolve. Heartbreak found him before superstardom could protect him. Early relationships faded as life accelerated. One engagement ended after he flew across an ocean, hoping distance could still be crossed, only to return knowing her heart had already moved toward another.